Okay, so we made pretty nice progress with our homepage. We've coded up the header, the Jumbotron, and our main tiles that will let us have navigation as well as a map showing where the restaurant is and letting the user click on it and get directions directly to the restaurant. So the last thing we're going to be coding on this particular page is the footer. So basically we need to code up this piece right here. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to make sure it stays this way, in other words, in these three columns, through the small screen size. And as soon as it goes down below the small screen size, we want them to stack one upon the other, maybe even give them a horizontal line in between them just to give it a visual distinction. Okay, so let's go back to our code editor. And I already have some code prepared for this lecture, so I'll copy and paste it in a second and we'll go over it. However, first, let me give you a quick tip. It's very convenient sometimes to end the divs, especially in a page that goes on for a while, has a nice amount of content, to end it with a HTML comment that will basically say it's the end of whatever the div it is that you're pointing to. So in this case, it's the div with an ID home tile. So if I actually scroll up, my ID or my editor is going to help me out and say, oh, this is the div that I'm actually on. The closing div I'm on is corresponding to this one. But however, visually, sometimes it's hard to tell what's going on. So it's helpful to put these type of notes in. Okay, moving on to the footer. Well, if it's the footer, I guess we should use the semantic tag footer. And we're going to give it a class called panel footer. And what panel footer class does is set some default background, some padding, and things like that. So this is a convenient class. Inside that panel, we're going to a panel footer, we're going to have a div that is a container. And the container is going to nicely correspond to our container in every single section. So in the main section, we also had a container that basically had, I believe, the whole main content in it. And in the top, in the header of the set of our website, we also had a container as well. So they should all very nicely line up. And of course, since we're going to be subdividing this into these three cells or three grids, then we're definitely going to need the container in order to place the next div in here that's called the row, right? The row class div. So here we go. So this is the row class, and the way we're going to divide it, as I told you, is we're going to have these three sections. One, two. One section is going to be just announcing what hours the restaurant is going to be open. The second is going to give us some address information. And the third is going to show the testimonials, meaning just give a couple of quotes from customers. So again, the way we're going to divide that is we want three grids or three cells across the screen, and we want them to stack as soon as it gets to be smaller than the small screen size. As you remember, this means this will stack as soon as it gets to be smaller than the small screen size, which is, I believe, about 768 pixels. So around 767 pixels, it'll become extra small, and all these sections will start stacking one upon the other. And since we have 4 as our column identifier, it means that we're going to have 4, 4, and 4, that's 12. So we're going to have 3 different sections visible across the screen. Okay, before we go into trying to style this, let's just take a look at the actual information here. So here we have a span, and this span has a break after it, so we want basically a break line to go here, and then it's going to have the hours, again a break, it's going to have other hours, again a break, and then it's just going to say Saturday closed. Now, the reason we kept the span only on the hours is because we want, obviously, the hours to be a little bit of a different font and maybe a different size than the rest of the information. And the rest of it is going to be pretty much the same. Now, we're going to anticipate that it's going to stack under when it gets to be smaller than the small size and the extra small size, and therefore we want some kind of a other visual distinction between these sections other than just some spaces. So we're going to place a horizontal rule right here, HR, the HR tag, and we're going to give it a class visible XS, which means this HR is only going to show up when the screen size is extra small. And if the screen size is any bigger than that, this HR is not even going to show up. So we're good to go here. The rest of it is basically exactly the same. It's the same structure. We have the section, the column definition, and the span with some paragraphs here And again, we're going to be able to target them specifically. And again, in HR, that's going to be only visible when the screen is extra small. And the testimonials are pretty much the same, except here we have some paragraphs, and that's about it. The last div here before the footer ends is just the copyright sign that is David Chu's China Bistro 2015. Probably should just change it to 2016 at this point. And we place the copyright sign here as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that and go to our browser and take a look as to what this looks like. Okay, so it looks pretty bad, but the positioning of it is pretty good, right? So the default colors of the footer didn't really quite agree with this whole thing. So it's kind of hard to really see what's going on here. But if we squeeze the browser, let's go ahead and do that. And let's see, this is still pretty at the small range. See what happens when we go to extra small. And the extra small, you could barely see it here, but this is the text, and you could see the line here showed up, the HR, the horizontal rule, the address, and the copyright here is also working quite well. It's sitting right in the center. Okay, so let's go ahead and stretch our browser back out and go to the code editor, and let's scroll down a little bit below the ending of the header styles. Should be right around here, and the header. And let me copy and paste at least some of the styles that I've pre-baked for our footer. So we'll start the footer styles right here. So first of all, we're going to give it some margin. We want to kind of separate ourselves from those tiles that are going to be right above it. And we're also going to give some padding as well. So we kind of separate within the actual footer itself. And padding bottom also lets us separate a little bit better from the very bottom of the edge of the browser. And we'll change the background color so it's something that's decently able to be seen on the screen. And we'll give it a border top 0. We don't want the border on top. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm actually overriding a Bootstrap CSS class, which is fine because whatever it is that it's providing for us is going to merge, and some things are going to get either negated or just overridden by what I've written here. So let's save it right now. Let's go back to the browser and take a look how we're doing here. It's looking much better so far. We still need to style, I guess, maybe the separation a little bit better, and still need to style these headings a little bit better as well. Well, let's go ahead and try to do that. Let me go ahead and paste a couple of styles that I prepared for this lecture, and let's go over those. So the final style, panel footer div.row, is basically targeting that whole entire row of the address, the testimonials, and so on. And we want to give it a margin bottom of 35. So actually, let's go ahead and comment out the rest of it so we'll see what actually is going on. Let's save that and let's go back. And we could see that we separated the copyright from the rest of the row, and it's now looking a little bit nicer because the copyright really has nothing to do with these 3 cells here in this grid. That's one. The next one is we're going to increase the line height a little bit of the address and the hours. And if we go back, you could see that we separated it a little bit better, so it's not so kind of squished in together. So it's still looking pretty good. And as far as the testimonials are concerned, we left them alone because we want to apply a little bit of a different style to them altogether. So let's go back to our code editor and let's move our comment all the way here. And let's see, so now what we're doing is we're increasing the font size of anything that is within span. So our span and address span is going to get the font size increased by about 30%, 1.3 M. So if we save that and go back to the browser, you can see now that the hours and the address headings stand out a little bit better, and you can see that that's actually a heading and the information is right below that. Let's go back to the code editor and move our comment down a little bit more. So with the # address P, what we're targeting that, let's go and take a look as to what we're targeting. In the address, we're targeting that delivery area within 3-4 miles. And that we want it to stay kind of green and smaller because it's a kind of a note on the side. So let's go back to our styles and say, so we're making this green, and the font size we're making a little bit smaller, and the line height we're making a little bit smaller as well. The line height before was 2, so in this case we're making it just that smaller to 1.8 just to kind of squeeze them a little bit better. So let's save that and go back to our browser. And you can see here that this turned green, and also the line height is just a tad smaller than the line height between these 2 lines. Okay, let's go back to the code editor and move our testimonials actually all the way down here. So we'll erase it all together. Let's take this spaces out of here. We don't need them. Okay, so the testimonials, we obviously want them to be italic just to make it look like it's actually, people's writing. So it at least reminds people that it's something personal. And testimonials and p nth child 2. So the number 2 one, we want the margin to be 25. So what we're saying is, let's go back to our HTML. What we're saying is that the second paragraph, I want the second paragraph to have a margin top of 25. So I want to be able to separate the second paragraph from the first one a little bit. So let's save that and take a look as to what that looks like. You can see this now, this area right here is about 25 pixels. So we separated the first testimonial from the second one, and you can see also that both of them are italic, so they look kind of nice. So that's it for part 1 of this lecture. And in part 2, we're going to start looking into styling this footer so it's laid out nicely even in smaller screen sizes.